My sister stole my wedding dress and got praised for having amazing taste. So I waited 6 months, crashed her vow renewal ceremony, and destroyed her entire life in 60 seconds. She's now facing criminal charges and her marriage is over. But before I tell you how it happened, I want you to comment and tell us where you are watching from. Have you done that? Thank you. Well, let's go. My name is Alice Mitchell and I'm 28 years old, and I'm about to tell you the most insane story about family betrayal you've ever heard. 6 months ago, I thought I was living my best life. Married to my college sweetheart Austin, working as a graphic designer, and finally feeling like everything was falling into place. But sometimes life has a way of showing you just how twisted the people closest to you can be. It all started when I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break, mindlessly clicking through wedding photos that people always flood your timeline with. Then I saw it. My sister Monique's wedding album from her ceremony 2 weeks earlier. I should mention that Austin and I had been on our honeymoon in Jamaica during her wedding, which is why I missed it. The family wasn't happy about the timing conflict, but Austin had already booked our resort months in advance. But there she was, radiant and smiling in what looked exactly like my custom wedding dress. The same dress I'd spent 8 months designing with a local seamstress. The same dress that cost me $4,000. The same dress that had my grandmother's vintage lace sewn into the bodice. My heart started pounding as I zoomed in on the photo. The neckline, the beadwork, even the way the fabric fell, it was identical. But something was off. The train had been cut shorter, and there were gaudy rhinestones added around the waist that definitely weren't part of my original design. I sat there staring at my phone screen, trying to convince myself I was seeing things. Maybe it was just a similar style. Designers copy each other all the time, right? But as I scrolled through more photos, the sick feeling in my stomach grew stronger. That wasn't just any dress. That was my dress. I could tell by the unique butterfly pattern in the lace that I'd specifically requested. A tribute to our grandmother who collected butterfly brooches. My hands were literally shaking as I called Austin. "Baby, you need to come home right now," I whispered into the phone, trying not to let my coworkers hear the panic in my voice. He could tell something was seriously wrong and left work immediately. When he got home, I showed him the photos. His face went from confusion to absolute rage in about 3 seconds. "Alice, that's definitely your dress," he said, his jaw clenched tight. "But how is that even possible? Your dress is hanging in our closet, right?" We both rushed upstairs to our bedroom, but when I opened the garment bag where I'd carefully stored my dress after our wedding, it was empty. Just the plastic bag and some tissue paper. My legs literally gave out and Austin had to catch me before I hit the floor. That's when everything clicked. 2 weeks before Monique's wedding, while we were in Jamaica, our house had been broken into. The police said it looked like someone with a key had entered, and the only things missing were some jewelry and cash. We never even thought to check the dress. The police report was still sitting in our filing cabinet from 2 weeks ago. Detective Rodriguez had told us it looked like an inside job because there were no signs of forced entry, and whoever did it knew exactly what they were looking for. They'd bypassed expensive electronics and went straight for small, valuable items. At the time, I'd suspected our neighbor's teenage son, but now everything was becoming crystal clear. I called the detective immediately. "Detective Rodriguez, this is Alice Mitchell. You investigated a break-in at my house 2 weeks ago." His voice was professional but curious when I explained about finding my wedding dress in my sister's photos. "Mrs. Mitchell, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have proof that it's the same dress?" "I have photos from my own wedding, the original design sketches and receipts from the seamstress," I told him, my voice getting stronger with each word. "Plus, my sister definitely has a key to my house. She's been watching it for us when we travel for the past 3 years." The detective asked me to come in the next morning to file an additional report and bring all my documentation. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the comments under Monique's photos. Dozens of people praising her impeccable taste and asking where she got such a beautiful dress. My own aunts and cousins were commenting things like, "Girl, you have such an eye for fashion," and "This dress is absolutely stunning, where did you find it?" She was literally getting praised for my creativity, my vision, by $4,000. Austin found me at 2 a.m. sitting on the kitchen floor, crying and scrolling through the comments. "Baby, we're going to handle this," he said, pulling me into his arms. "Your sister crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." The next morning, I marched into Detective Rodriguez's office with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Wedding photos, design sketches, receipts, text messages between me and the seamstress, even the original inspiration board I'd created on Pinterest. The detective spread everything across his desk and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is pretty damning evidence," he said, comparing the photos side by side. "The unique lace pattern here, the beadwork along the neckline, it's clearly the same dress. And you said your sister had access to your house." I nodded, explaining how we'd trusted her with a spare key for years. She'd watered plants, collected mail, even stayed over sometimes when she had fights with her boyfriend. "There's something else," I added, pulling out my phone. "Look at the timeline. My wedding was 18 months ago. Her engagement photos were posted just 6 months ago, which means she got engaged after she'd already seen me in this dress. What if she planned this whole thing?" The detective raised an eyebrow. Sounded crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Detective Rodriguez said he'd need to interview Monique and compare the dress she wore to my original. "The problem is, if she altered it significantly, it might be harder to prove in court," he explained. "But based on what you've shown me, I think we have enough for theft charges." He told me to document everything and avoid confronting Monique directly until they could build their case. But as I left the police station, I felt this burning rage building in my chest. She wasn't just going to get away with this. Not if I had anything to say about it. Over the next few days, I became a woman possessed. I printed every single photo from Monique's wedding album and started analyzing them like I was solving a murder case. The more I looked, the angrier I got. She hadn't just stolen my dress, she'd butchered it. The elegant train that had taken the seamstress weeks to perfect was hacked off unevenly. The tasteful pearl accents I'd chosen were covered with cheap rhinestones that looked like they came from a craft store. Austin was worried about my obsession, but I couldn't help myself. I called Mrs. Patterson, the seamstress who'd made my dress, and asked if she'd be willing to examine Monique's photos. "Oh, honey," she said after I emailed her the pictures, "that's definitely your dress. I'd recognize my own work anywhere. But what they did to it, it's like watching someone vandalize the Mona Lisa." Mrs. Patterson agreed to write a statement for the police, detailing the specific techniques and materials she'd used that were visible in Monique's photos. She also revealed something that made my blood boil even hotter. "Your sister actually called me about 3 months ago," she said quietly. "She claimed she was planning a surprise renewal ceremony for you and wanted to know about the dress construction. I thought it was sweet, so I told her about the hidden clasps and how the bustle worked. I'm so sorry, Alice. I never imagined." That's when I realized this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment theft. Monique had been planning this for months, gathering information, waiting for the perfect opportunity. She'd probably been in my house multiple times, studying the dress, figuring out how to make it work for her body type. The level of premeditation was staggering. I screenshot every comment on her photos, saved every compliment she received, and documented every lie she told about where the dress came from. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal at family gatherings. 2 weeks after I'd discovered the truth, we had our monthly family dinner at Mama's house. Monique walked in glowing, still riding the high of her wedding compliments, while I sat there knowing what she'd done but unable to say anything because of the ongoing investigation. "Girl, everyone's still talking about your wedding dress," our cousin Shayla said, hugging Monique. "Where did you even find something that gorgeous?" Monique's answer made me want to flip the dining room table. "Oh, you know me, I have a good eye for beautiful things. I found this little boutique downtown and knew it was perfect the moment I saw it." I caught Austin's eye across the room and I could see him struggling to keep his mouth shut too. Our grandmother, who was 92 and sharp as a tack, studied Monique's face with those knowing eyes she'd always had. "That dress looked mighty familiar," Grandma Rose said slowly. "Reminded me of something, but I can't quite place it." Monique's face went tight for just a second before she recovered. "Well, classic styles are always in fashion," she said with a laugh that sounded forced. But I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. Grandma Rose had sewn that vintage lace herself 60 years ago. If anyone would recognize it, it would be her. After dinner, Grandma Rose pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Baby girl, that lace in your sister's dress. That's the same pattern I taught you to make when you were 10 years old. The same lace I gave you for your wedding dress." Her voice was quiet but steel hard. "What's really going on here?" I couldn't lie to Grandma Rose. She'd raised me and Monique when our parents were going through their messy divorce, and she had a way of seeing through bullshit that was almost supernatural. In whispered tones, I told her everything. About the break-in, the stolen dress, the police investigation. Her face went through a range of emotions: shock, disappointment, and finally, a cold anger I'd never seen from her before. "That child stole from you," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "She stole your grandmother's lace, your dream, your special moment, and then had the nerve to parade it around like it was hers." Grandma Rose had survived the Jim Crow era, raised 6 children as a single mother, and built a successful catering business from nothing. She didn't tolerate disrespect, especially not from family. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. I explained about the police case and how Detective Rodriguez said it might take months to build enough evidence. Grandma Rose shook her head. "Sometimes the law moves too slow for justice, baby. Sometimes you have to make your own." She told me something I'd never known before. "Your sister has always been jealous of you, Alice. Even when y'all were little girls, she couldn't stand when you got attention. Remember your high school graduation speech? She threw such a fit about you being valedictorian that she made herself sick and had to go to the hospital, pulling focus from your big day." I remembered that night. Monique had complained of stomach pains right before the ceremony, and half the family had to leave to take her to the ER. The doctors never found anything wrong, but she'd managed to overshadow my moment. "She's been doing it your whole life," Grandma Rose continued. "But this time she went too far." As I drove home that night, Grandma Rose's words echoed in my head. "Sometimes you have to make your own justice." A week later, I got the call that would change everything. Monique's new mother-in-law, Mrs. Henderson, was hosting a vow renewal ceremony for the newlyweds. Apparently, Monique had convinced her that their original wedding was too rushed, and they deserved a proper celebration with all of Dion's extended family. The invitation came through our cousin Shayla, who was organizing the family's attendance. "It's going to be at that big Baptist church downtown," Shayla explained over the phone. "Mrs. Henderson is going all out, professional photographer, live music, reception at the country club afterward. She really wants to welcome Monique into the family properly." The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, and over 200 people were expected to attend. That's when the idea hit me like a lightning bolt. What if I showed up? What if I waited until that moment when the preacher asks if anyone objects to the union? What if I stood up in front of all those people and told them exactly what kind of person they were celebrating? The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. Monique had stolen my moment, my dress, my grandmother's lace. She'd gotten praise and compliments that belonged to me. She'd probably wear the butchered dress again, basking in attention she didn't deserve. But what if I turned her big moment into her worst nightmare? Austin thought I was losing my mind when I told him the plan. "Baby, that's crazy. You'll cause a scene, embarrass the whole family, probably get arrested." But when I showed him the latest photos Monique had posted modeling the stolen dress again for some photo shoot, his tune changed. "You know what? Maybe crazy is exactly what this situation calls for." The week leading up to the vow renewal was torture. I went back and forth between feeling justified and wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Was I really going to crash my sister's ceremony and humiliate her in front of hundreds of people? Was I becoming the kind of person who destroys family relationships over a dress? But then I'd remember the hours I'd spent designing every detail of that dress. The tears of joy when I first put it on. The way Austin's face lit up when he saw me walking down the aisle. She hadn't just stolen fabric and thread, she'd stolen one of the most important moments of my life and tried to make it hers. Detective Rodriguez called with an update on the investigation. "We interviewed your sister and she's denying everything. Claims she bought the dress from a consignment shop and doesn't have the receipt. Without being able to examine the actual dress, it's going to be hard to prove." He paused. "I have to ask, do you know where the dress is now?" I told him about the vow renewal ceremony, and there was silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Mitchell, I can't officially advise you to attend that ceremony," he said carefully. "But if something were to happen that allowed us to examine that dress in person, it would certainly strengthen our case." I spent Friday night going through all my wedding photos, printing the clearest shots of me in the dress. I organized the police report, the receipts, the original design sketches. Everything I'd need to prove my case. Austin helped me put it all in a folder, and as we worked, I felt this strange calm settling over me. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked one more time. I looked at the photo of me and him on our wedding day, both of us glowing with happiness, Me in the dress I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl. She took this from us, I said quietly. She needs to face the consequences. Saturday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I put on a simple black dress, classy but not too formal, and did my makeup carefully. I wanted to look put together and credible, not like some crazy person causing drama. Austin wore a dark suit, and together we looked like we were heading to a business meeting rather than a family confrontation. The church parking lot was packed when we arrived. I recognized cars belonging to aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. Mrs. Henderson had really gone all out, with professional photographers capturing guests as they arrived and elegant floral arrangements flanking the church entrance. For a moment I almost lost my nerve. This was going to hurt a lot of people, not just Monique. But then I saw her through the church window, radiant in my stolen dress, accepting congratulations and compliments that should have been mine. The altered rhinestones caught the light as she posed for photos, and I felt that familiar surge of rage. She looked so pleased with herself, so proud of her impeccable taste and gorgeous dress. Austin squeezed my hand as we walked up the church steps. "You got this, baby," he whispered. "What she did was wrong and everyone needs to know it." We slipped into the back pew just as the ceremony was beginning. I could see Monique at the altar, beaming as the pastor began his opening remarks about the sanctity of marriage and honesty between spouses. The irony was almost too much to bear. Here she was, celebrating honesty and commitment while wearing evidence of her theft and betrayal. I clutched my folder of proof and waited for the right moment. The ceremony proceeded exactly as I'd hoped. Pastor Williams went through the traditional vows, talking about love, trust, and building a life together on a foundation of honesty. Monique looked absolutely radiant, and I had to admit the stolen dress looked beautiful on her, even with the tacky alterations. The guests were enchanted, whispering about how gorgeous she looked and what a perfect couple she and Dion made. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Pastor Williams cleared his throat and looked out at the congregation. "If there is anyone here who knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined together in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The church fell silent. This was it. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I stood up slowly, my folder clutched in my hands, and cleared my throat. "I object," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent church. The gasp that went through the congregation was audible. Heads turned, people whispered, and I could see Monique's face go pale as she recognized me in the back. "Alice," she said, her voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor, feeling like I was in some kind of movie. "I'm here," I said in a voice that was surprisingly steady, "because my sister is wearing a stolen wedding dress. This dress," I pointed at her, "belongs to me. She broke into my house and stole it while I was on my honeymoon." The church erupted. People were talking over each other, asking questions, some standing up to get a better look. Monique's face had gone from pale to bright red, and Dion looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "That's ridiculous," Monique shouted over the noise. "This is my dress. I bought it fair and square." But her voice was shaking and I could see the panic in her eyes. Mrs. Henderson stood up from the front pew, her face a mask of confusion and growing anger. "Now wait just a minute," she called out. "What exactly are you accusing my daughter-in-law of?" I opened my folder and pulled out the side-by-side photos I'd prepared, clear shots of me wearing the dress at my wedding 18 months earlier, next to recent photos of Monique in the same dress. "This is me at my wedding in March 2022, I announced, holding up the photos so the whole church could see. "And this is your daughter-in-law wearing the same dress, my dress, at her wedding 2 weeks ago." I walked closer to the altar, showing the photos to Pastor Williams and Mrs. Henderson. "You can see the unique lace pattern here, the specific beadwork along the neckline. This dress was custom-made for me by Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street." The church was buzzing with whispers as people passed their phones around, comparing the photos. I could hear fragments of conversations. "Oh my God, it's the same dress. Look at the lace pattern. She's right, that's definitely the same dress." Mrs. Henderson's face was growing redder by the minute. She looked at Monique with an expression I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. "Monique," she said in a voice that could freeze fire, "you told me this dress cost you $3,000. You showed me the receipt from some boutique downtown." Monique's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I can explain. But no explanation came. She just stood there, caught in her lie, wearing my stolen dress in front of 200 witnesses. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I knew that dress was too expensive for you," she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at Monique. "I questioned how a girl working part-time at a hair salon could afford a $3,000 custom dress. But you showed me that fake receipt. You made me look like a fool." The church exploded into chaos. Half the congregation was on their feet, talking over each other, pointing at Monique, pulling out their phones to record. I could see our family members looking mortified. Aunt Carol had her face buried in her hands. Uncle Jerome was shaking his head in disgust, and Grandma Rose, bless her heart, was nodding with satisfaction. Dion finally found his voice. "Monique, please tell me this isn't true," he said, his face ashen. "Please tell me you didn't steal your sister's wedding dress." But Monique couldn't even look at him. She just stood there, trembling in my stolen dress, exposed in front of everyone who mattered to her. Pastor Williams tried to restore order, but it was useless. Mrs. Henderson was ranting about being embarrassed in front of her church family. Other guests were demanding to see the police report I'd mentioned, and someone in the back was already calling the police. Detective Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, and Monique was arrested right there at the altar, still wearing my dress. 3 months later, she pled guilty to breaking and entering and theft charges. Her marriage didn't survive the scandal. Dion filed for divorce, saying he couldn't trust someone who would steal from her own sister. She lost her job when the story went viral, and last I heard she was living back with our parents, facing a mountain of legal bills and social humiliation. As for me, I got my dress back, had it professionally restored by Mrs. Patterson, and donated it to a program that provides wedding dresses to brides who can't afford them. Sometimes justice is about more than just getting your stuff back. It's about making sure actions have consequences. And sometimes when the law moves too slowly, you have to make your own justice, just like Grandma Rose taught me.